The month of May has not exactly been very fun for the Pittsburgh Pirates, but always remember it's not about the journey, it's about the destination. We'll talk about that and more on today's episode of Locked On Pirates.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back to the Locked On Pirates podcast, everybody, here on Monday, May 22nd. I can't believe it's almost the end of the month of May, but I'm kind of happy it's almost the month of May with the way the Pirates have played. My name is Ethan Smith, your host of the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network. We're at your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every day, as every Monday. I'm joined by Gary Morgan, and we were talking before we started recording our episode today about where the Pirates currently sit. And you would ask the consensus on this answer, Gary, and a lot of people would say they look like crap. I can't say a certain word now because YouTube monetizes my videos now. Thank you for 1,000 subscribers, guys. So I got to be careful what I say. But as you guys heard me in that intro, the old saying, it's not about the journey, it's about the destination. And Gary was looking at the standings real quick, as I've told a lot of people to do, because at the end of the day, yes, there's a lot of things that matter outside of the wins and losses for this team. That's kind of been the old adage of what we've said for the last couple of years when they were losing 100 games. But now that still reigns true when you're looking at a ball club that is still 24-22, I believe. And Gary, if you can reconfirm this for me, there are only 7 teams in the National League that have a winning record right now, and the Pittsburgh Pirates are one of them. And if I remember correctly, Gary, back in April on one of our shows, I'd have to find which show it was, said the biggest component to the Pirates going 20-8 was them finding a way to have that cushion when something like this would happen. Here we are. And if you would have told me that the Pirates would be 24-22 on May 22nd, 2023, with the team that they are currently fielding without O'Neal Cruz, I would be jumping for joy. Now, obviously, I'm not based off of how they played, but it's still something that I think Pirates fans need to take a look at and say they can go one of two directions. And what are those directions, Gary?
Yeah, I mean, they can go up or down, obviously. I think they could precipitously fall and just keep going, or they can turn it around. And how they turn it around, Ethan, it's going to have to take little things, man. Like, you're going to need to see something like, a 1-0 victory. A walk-off win when everything looked lost. A non-star getting hotter than the sun. Something along those lines. It's not going to come from gripping the handle of the bat too tight, feeling like you can't miss a spot because your team can't overcome 2 runs. I think one thing that a lot of us missed during that huge streak of quality starts from the starting rotation is how both sides of this team were feeding off each other.
Yeah.
The hitting was so outstanding. Everybody that went to that mound felt like they could throw anything they want, and if they gave up a long ball, so what?
Yeah.
The offense is just going to come out and fix it. And once that started to dissipate, you started to see the tight sphincters start to happen. And the only one who's risen above that really is Mitch Keller and Rich Hill to a degree. And, Rich Hill's had his ups and downs as well. But when he wants to take over a game and he's determined that nothing's going to get in his way, he just does.
Yeah, he does.
But I think like that's a commodity they need to find. And the offense needs to stop getting the same kind of feeling whenever they get runners in scoring position. We started seeing them come out of that a little bit in those 2 blowout wins against Detroit and Arizona. But you need to see it more consistently. At this point, Ethan, I want to see a string of 5-3 victories a hell of a lot more than I want to see 12-1.
Yeah. And that's how I feel too. And you brought up the one of the ones you brought up was a walk-off when all felt lost. And that took me immediately back to the Houston Astros series where if they don't walk off that game with G1 Bay taking Ryan Presley deep, they get swept in that series. That whole winning streak probably, like that whole big streak of winning probably just goes right down the drain because Houston was the better team in the series. Ultimately, they did win the series. But you look at games like that and you say, okay, this team had life. You look at a game like yesterday where, if I remember, I think they had 3 different errors on 3 different occasions. I believe it was Connor Joe who literally scored a run without the Pirates even having to do anything because of Arizona Diamondbacks errors, and then they just gave it right back to them.
Right.
So you said the little things, and I think that's what's really getting to this team right now is you're looking at some of the stuff that they were doing in April that they were doing right at an exceptional rate, by the way, may I add. It was a rate that was never going to be sustained. Not even the best teams in baseball were going to be able to sustain some of the things the Pirates were doing. I believe they were hitting over 300 as a team with runners in scoring position in the month of April. That is just an unsustainable number, which I still believe. I think they're still leading the National League in runners in scoring position by average last time I checked.
They are.
Which is just shows you how good they were in April. And the other thing that I wanted to get into is like, I don't want to act like everything from the month of April just dissipated. There's still things that we've seen from this team right now that are still very good components of this team. The bullpen, for instance, if you want to use recency bias, Robert Stevenson and Dwayne Underwood Jr. have not been the greatest things on the planet. But if we remember before Saturday's game, Robert Stevenson had 9 straight innings pitched without giving up a run. So he was pitching very well coming off the IL and just so happened to have these 2 bad outings, which, of course, was pinned on Derek Shelton. But every manager is bound to make a mistake. But you look at the bullpen overall, Dauri Moreta has taken a little bit of a step back, but he's still very good. He's still one of the best guys in baseball in terms of not allowing runs with inherited runners. David Bednar, he comes into the game. You already know what you're getting from him. So you're still getting the pitching aspect of things, but as you mentioned, they're not getting the same run support and offensive output that they were getting in April. So now, like you said about missing that one spot and giving up that home run, Corbin Carroll homered in the first inning yesterday. In April, they probably wouldn't have cared about that. They would have been whatever.
The only thing I would say about the bullpen usage, and it's a light criticism, but it's a criticism. When you're going like they are right now, where you're really struggling to pull out victories, you maybe need to break your formula a little bit.
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is when the Pirates are up, say 3-1 in the 6th inning or the 7th inning, they tend to go with their formulaic pitchers. They have their 7th inning guy, which is right now Robert Stevenson and or Hernandez.
Mm-hmm.
And either one, fine. They've both been good for the most part, despite the last couple outings from Stevenson. But that is the ramp to Holderman and Bednar. Well, you need to maybe change that a little bit. You need to be thinking when you're down like 3-1. Let's stay close. Let's use that same ramp right now. I wouldn't recommend this in July when you're 15 games over 500, but I'm recommending it right now when you're 2 games over 500 in danger of squandering that huge buffer zone you built for yourself. You have to change what constitutes getting to a win, and sometimes keeping it close is one of those things. What you see a lot of the time, Ethan, is he brings in a reliever, and it's one of the lesser relievers, and then the floodgates open.
Yep.
And once the floodgates open, it's now it's 5-1. Now the offense already feels like they can't do enough to win, and now they've got to somehow post 4 runs in 3 innings. They're all going to start swinging for the fence. Nothing happens. There's a lot of problems built into that. But to me, treating the game as different because you're down a little bit, as opposed to just trying to keep it within striking distance, is something that I think Derek Shelton's probably got to make a little bit of a mental change on.
Yeah, I wouldn't be mad at all if he brought in a David Bednar in the 7th yesterday when they were down, I think, like you said, 3-1. I think was the score at the time.
It was 4-3.
4-3, yeah. I wouldn't be mad at that. And the other thing is David Bednar across his career has proven to you that he can pitch multiple innings. If he goes out there down 4-3,
that's off the table, brother.
Off the table.
They're not doing it. Period.
Not doing it anymore.
It's the one thing Ben Cherington got in Derek Shelton's kitchen about last year.
Oh, pitching Bednar
was the usage of Bednar, and it's just not going to happen. Now, does that mean you can't see him go 1.1 innings once?
Yeah,
I bet you will. But they don't want him doing ups and downs. They think this is a big cause for his back issues.
Gotcha. So, I mean, we'll remove that from the table. But even then, let's say you would have put Bednar out there down 4-3. He keeps the game close, obviously, because he's David Bednar. I mean, he's going to have his blow-ups every once in a while, too. But then that still gives you the access of Colin Holderman, Jose Hernandez, and all those guys for the final 2 innings. But you're also in reach of the game still. So I do agree with that a lot. And before we do the ad break, I want to let you guys know that we're going to be talking about players that have been playing good during the streak of May. And it may be some guys that you don't expect and that I personally would like to see more of. But before we do that, I want to let you guys know about the wonderful people over at eBay Motors. If I could find the overlay, there we go. Because you can build your vision part by part. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. I actually have to start driving to work again for my new job. So yeah, I already looked at my car a little bit, even though it's a car that has 1,500 miles on it. I still made sure that things were okay. And if I need them, I looked at eBay Motors just to make sure that the parts were there. Because guess what? They're going to always have the right parts because they have 122 million of them. So get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. We are probably going to be on with Locked On Diamondbacks at some point today to talk about that series. He really wanted to get on. Miller really wanted to get on with us for a crossover, so we might get 2 episodes today from you guys. And then, of course, I'm going to talk to Bryce Patrick of Locked On Rangers following the series to get him on. And with how things are going, Gary, of course, most people aren't going to really look at who's playing super well because the team's not playing super well. But there are definitely some guys that are playing super well. One, Ji-Hwan Bae, and I remember I think you tweeted about it last week, had a sneakily good week that just nobody really mentioned whatsoever. Now, I will say another thing that they might need to kind of tone down a little bit is I believe he's been thrown out the last 4 times that he's tried to steal a base.
Yeah.
I get it. He's a fast kid. He can steal bases. I think he still has the league lead in stolen bases right now. That doesn't mean every time he gets on base, he has to steal second.
I think what I've seen from him is he doesn't take big enough leads.
No, he does not.
And I think a lot of that has to do with his height. It's very hard to get back when you're too far out and you're a short guy. He's going to have to come up with something. Mm-hmm. It's either going to have to be that jogging start that you see a lot of people get, or he's going to have to develop some kind of a hot move where he gets that additional space before he takes off. You can't take that away from his game or he doesn't matter.
That's very true.
So he's either going to steal bases for you or he's not. That said, you got to vary it a little bit. You can't go on, 0-1 every time. You can't go. You can't just go. I said this on Twitter too the other day. Whenever the announcers say, "Boy, now would be a good time to try to steal," my first thought is always, "Well, the other team thinks that too."
Yeah.
So maybe it's not.
It's the old adage of when you're watching a football game and you can see that you could literally call Tony Romo call out the plays on CBS. And it's well, yeah, the other team probably sees that too and the play gets stuffed. It's yeah, well, these are professionals that know what's going on. And yeah, I've noticed that too. Greg Brown will say, "Oh, this is a great time for them to steal right here." And I'm yeah, the other opposing manager probably thinks the same thing. And next thing you know, Ji-Hwan Bae's out by 4 feet. But he was still swinging a good bat last week. He was on base a ton. It just got to the point where, as you mentioned, they weren't varying his steal attempts at all. And he was just, I mean, it would say, oh, cool, G1 Bay's on base with nobody out. And there that goes. One thing that I also wouldn't mind with him, since we're on the topic, and I don't know if it's something that he would really want to do, but I wouldn't mind seeing G1 Bay in the 9 spot instead of the 8 spot a lot of times, because again, Austin Hedges, I already know all of your opinions on Austin Hedges. They're in my comments section on every episode. You guys ask me to talk about it all the time. When you get a guy like G1 Bay on base, he's going to try to steal at some point. But even if he doesn't, you kind of want a guy that's going to put something in the outfield to at least get him to third. Austin Hedges can be that guy every once in a while, but we know that he's not the offensive catcher type. So I think if you put Bay at 9, obviously that would kind of shut things down from 6 to 8, with Hedges being at 8 or Delay being at 8. But if you have G1 Bay on first, then you get Kutch, Reynolds, Santana. If you have nobody out, that's a pretty good formula to me to get G1 Bay like moving around the base pass pretty heavily.
It is. I agree with you. I like the idea. I've wanted that at the beginning of the season. This really comes down to what are you going to do with Austin Hedges, because he's the problem in the lineup, at least when he starts. He's not going to get hits most of the time.
No.
And look at the 2 blowouts. Who got hits? Austin Hedges.
Austin Hedges, of all people.
Well, it shows like how key it is to not have that dead zone in the lineup. And you know, G1 Bay's problem for putting him in that 9 hole or the leadoff spot for that matter, he's got a ton of speed, but his on base percentage is only .311.
Yeah, it's not good.
Okay, like I'm not making accommodations for a .311 on base percentage guy. So where you go in the lineup really doesn't matter to me.
Yeah,
you're in there wherever you are. You want to be in a place where like a traditional on base guy goes and it matters. Show me that it matters. Get the on base percentage up where it makes a difference, and then we'll talk. But like for right now, that 7, 8, 9 area, it just doesn't matter on this team. They don't have enough offense back in that area.
And looking at the front end of it, that does have some offense too. I think arguably the best decision that Derek Shelton has made manager-wise this year so far is one that he's made recently. Andrew McCutchen being in the leadoff spot has really worked wonders for this team so far. I think he first did it on, was it last Sunday against Baltimore, I believe, is when they first put him in that leadoff spot, or was it Saturday? It was
last Sunday.
Yeah, it was last Sunday, and I believe he had like 4 straight games with a hit out of the leadoff spot.
Well, I mean, in his past 20 at-bats, Kutch has reached base 9 times, good for a 350 average and 759 OPS.
Yeah, so you'll take that out of the leadoff spot, because then you get Brian Reynolds with a runner on already. You get to the heart of the lineup where Brian Reynolds has also played very well as of late also. It just hasn't been talked about much because of the team's performance. Outside of other things, the 1 through 6, I like that you talked about that the 1 through 6 has been kind of okay. Like Ke'Bryan Hayes is starting to get some launch angle on his ball now. We saw it with the triple the other day against where Pavin Smith read it horribly wrong. Honestly, I thought if he read that right, it was probably an out. But it was
that's a Pirates outfielder. I say that should have been a catch.
Yeah, but I mean, the way that he read that ball was terrible. Bases clearing triple. But outside of that, too, with Ke'Bryan Hayes, he's also one of just the more unlucky guys in the lineup. Just go back and, like, for everybody listening, just go back and watch Ke'Bryan Hayes at bats if you can, and just look at his outs. I mean, a lot of times it's like a fly ball to center field. It's a line drive to the third baseman. It's a fly ball to right field. He's making good contact. You look at his Baseball Savant page, I'm sure it's probably pretty good. And he's improved from what he was dealing with last year. But, I mean, he's just unlucky. It is what it is. But we've also seen him get those doubles and those triples every once in a while. And he is still doing what he was doing last year that I joked about all the time, that if he was playing in any other ballpark, he'd probably have 10 home runs by now, because he always seems to hit the ball the hardest to center field, and he can never get it over that center field wall to save his life. I mean,
Sad thing is, we can actually look that up now, and no, it is not true. He'd only have 2 more home runs.
2 more home runs.
But still, I mean, in that blowout win in Detroit, he was the only one that didn't get a hit.
Yeah.
0 for 5. But you know what he did have? He had 3 balls that he hit over 90 miles an hour, right at somebody. So eventually that stuff kind of evens out. And I do think that's what we've seen recently with him. A lot of that stuff starting to even out. He's getting the ball, hitting the ball hard. People are either misplaying it or it's falling in, and hey, that's the luck of baseball. Nobody says that exit velocity doesn't matter who actually understands that exit velocity tends to be a predictor for future success. Does it matter that a guy lines out 102 miles an hour? No. Does it matter that he does it 3 times in a game and gets unlucky 3 times and has it caught? Probably not. But if you see a guy doing things like that, the law of averages tells you eventually that's not going to happen.
No.
There's a much higher likelihood that you're going to hit a ball that hard, it's going to land somewhere. So all indications are that Brian Hayes is turning a little bit of a corner here. Problem is, we've seen him turn that corner before.
Yeah.
Thing with Hayes that is frustrating is by the time he works his way back into it and he starts having balls fall for him, suddenly he'll go right back to that inside out swing. Everything will be grounded the second. Everything will be, popped up when he does go after it. And that's what's frustrating, because you'll watch him do this whole ramp up again.
Which it is interesting to think about too, because one thing that I do is people that have like an issue with his offense, but if you look at any person that watched him through the minor league system, offense was never his thing. He was never I don't want to say he was never a plus offensive player, but he was never a consistently above 300 hitter from what I know in the minor leagues. Now, I know when he came up here in 2020, he obviously had that crazy stretch at the COVID season where like everybody was a hyper for him, which understandably he was. Then he homers in his first, to me, his first real game, because I didn't really consider COVID too much of real baseball. Because I still have that video on my phone of him homering at Wrigley Field. And then, of course, we know what happened the next day that I've talked about a million times. But we're going to talk about not a million times after this ad break is the Pirates and Rangers series, because the Rangers are one of, if not the best team in baseball over the last couple of weeks. Wow, they're playing. So we're going to talk about this series and how the Pirates are going to stack up. But before we do that, go to play So Rare. It's really fun. It's free. You collect cards. I have O'Neill Cruz, David Bednar, Rich Hill, and Andrew McCutcheon already. I won another card this weekend on So Rare. That's how you play it. You collect, play, and win officially licensed digital cards, because it's a revolutionary fantasy baseball game and marketplace, transforming fans into owners with officially licensed digital cards featuring players from across all 30 MLB teams. Because unlike other fantasy baseball platforms, managers truly own their fantasy experience, collecting, buying, selling, and competing with player cards against global opponents to win epic rewards. So Rare Scarcity cards, you win those. You can win game tickets, merchandise, signed jerseys, and VIP experiences, like meeting MLB stars like Juan Soto and Julio Rodriguez. So make sure you head to SoRare.com/lockedon. That's spelled SORARE.com to draft your team of free player cards, set your lineup, and start competing today to win epic rewards. It's very fun. It's pretty easy to figure out, too. You just go into the game weeks. The game weeks are usually Monday through Wednesday and Thursday through Sunday. If you have pitchers, it lets you know that they have a probable start in there, so you don't have to scroll through a schedule for 10 minutes to try to figure out if a guy's starting or not. So it's a really fun time. But the Pittsburgh Pirates are in their playing teams in the West Division stint for the next 9 games. They are at home here against the Rangers, and then they travel to the West Coast to play the Mariners and the Giants. And then before playing the Brewers or Cubs like ever, they play the Cardinals again. Anyways, I don't think we're ever going to play the Brewers or the Cubs. It just feels like that. But you look at this series, and if you look at just records, this is a series between two teams who are pretty damn good. I mean, the Pirates, again, have not been that great as of May. They have not won a series yet. I'm trying to pull up MLB.com here so I can see what the probable starting pitching matchups are, because Gary's a little bit more prepared than me, and his computer is also probably about 6 years younger than mine. I've had this computer since senior year of high school.
It's Luis Ortiz versus Dane Dunning in the first game. Rich Hill, Nathan Eovaldi, Johan Oviedo, and Martin Perez.
So pretty much three of their very good pitchers. The Rangers, by the way, have been that team over the last couple of years that has thrown a lot of money at guys. You look at Corey Seager, you look at Marcus Semien, you look at Jacob deGrom, you look at, I believe, John Gray was another one you throw in there. They extended Martin Perez to keep him for a pretty handsome penny. Now it finally seems like it's all coming together for him. And if you guys watch the Rangers at all, which I don't expect a lot of you to do, they do have some sneaky good players. Jonah Heim has been a very good player for them as of late, the switch hitting catcher. You guys know I love switch hitters. That's why I loved watching Ketel Marte play all weekend. We already know about Adolis Garcia. He's already one of their better players. And then you already heard me mention Seager and Semien. Josh Young is another good one. Nathaniel Lowe. They're a good team. This is not a joke anymore, I think, for Texas. They have a very good pitching staff. Their offense is firing on all cylinders for the most part. They're beating good teams. They're in the lead in the AL West. So now that goes to how do the Pirates stack up against the Rangers? I think that's the biggest question that we have to ask ourselves here.
It's really going to be mostly about, can the Pirates pitching slow down their offense? And can the offense scratch out anything against them? I'll tell you what. The Pirates' last two blowout victories were against pitchers that they technically, on paper, were supposed to lose in historic fashion too.
Yes.
So, as they square off against Dane Dunning, who's 4-0 with a 1.69 ERA so far this year, maybe we shouldn't be as panicked as we have been. maybe they tend to hit guys like that a little bit better.
They're
Eovaldi's 5-2. Perez is 5-1.
Aren't their last three wins against three opening day starters? It was Zach Gallen, Eduardo Rodriguez, and Kyle Gibson.
Yeah. So the thing is, the matchups matter, but they only matter so much. I think it's mostly about just getting the bats off your shoulders early. Don't let them settle in. Don't let them just have two free strikes. I saw a lot of good positive signs, even in this Arizona series where they lost with the offense. I think in general, they looked like they were taking a better approach at the plate. Scoring a few more runs here and there. Not enough, but more. And in general, I think they're kind of coming out of that fog a little bit.
Yeah.
At least some of them.
Yeah, even in the losses, they didn't play too bad in terms of both. Like Sunday's game, they did. Sunday was okay. Like, what's going on here with the errors and stuff like that? But on Saturday's game, it was just bad luck in terms of Robert Stevenson finally getting beat up a little bit coming in for Mitch Keller, which, as we already talked about, you can make the argument for Keller staying in that game if you want. But I thought it was a smart decision to get him out because it did look like he was getting a little bit rattled. And the last thing you want is for him to throw 15 more pitches in an inning and then still be rattled leaving the game. But as far as everything's concerned, Wednesday was a good precursor to what I think this team can do when they beat Detroit 8-0. That's the kind of game where, okay, this offense is back a little bit. Then they come back, they do it against Arizona on Friday. And although they lost the other two games, I think more of it right now is about doing what you're doing right and doing it at the right time. And like you mentioned, I would rather see, and I agreed with you when you said this, I would rather see them tonight against Texas have Luis Ortiz finally have that good outing, win a game 2-1. Just go out there and win a low-scoring good game against a good baseball team.
Yeah,
I think
just
that would
play
be
good baseball. Make good plays. Just make the plays you should make. That's all there is to it. Like, we see the spectacular from this team an awful lot. Like Marcano going all the way out to like deep left field to make a catch on a pop out from shortstop. But let's make the average play. Let's make the double play we should make. Let's make the right decision on where you're throwing the baseball.
Yeah.
Let's get the strikeout or get the pitch at bat over with instead of waste 12 pitches on one guy. Let's just do some good baseball things.
And we will be looking for good baseball things today against the Texas Rangers. That'll be a 3-game set that runs through Wednesday. And then, I just don't get to write for Bucks Basement anymore on Thursdays because they're off on Thursdays for like the next 6 weeks. So you'll see my story on Tuesday for the recap of that game. Of course, over there with Gary's stuff, you'll have 5 Thoughts at 5 today. You'll have the Hump Day Q&A and Pirates Fan Forum on Thursday. Yes, I've memorized the schedule for you so that he doesn't have to tell you anymore. And I shouldn't have to tell you anymore. Gary's been on this podcast for almost 2 years now. But guys, thank you so much. Enjoy the Texas Rangers series. I will be, of course, recording a now after the game tonight, sharing my thoughts on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates, where we're closing in on 2,000 Twitter followers. But you guys have a wonderful rest of your Monday. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name's Ethan. That's Gary, and we'll see you on the flip side.